The day of Amina's wedding was not filled with laughter, songs, or the blessings that most brides dream of. Instead, she sat quietly in a dimly lit corner of her uncle's house, her hands trembling as the old bridal veil was placed over her head. She had lost her parents when she was just a child, and since then she had lived under the roof of her uncle and aunt, who treated her less like family and more like a burden. When she turned 18, instead of finding her a loving home or supporting her education, they arranged her marriage to a man the entire village whispered about, a poor carpenter who earned barely enough to eat. To her relatives, marrying her off was just one less mouth to feed, one less responsibility to carry. Amina's heart was heavy with fear. She imagined a life of hunger, hard labor, and shame. She had dreamed of love once, of a man who would hold her hand gently and look into her eyes with care. But that dream faded the moment she was told about her groom Yusuf, the carpenter who lived on the edge of the village. People mocked him for his simple clothes, for carrying his worn-out tools on his shoulder, and for not owning land or cattle like other men. To Amina, it felt like punishment rather than marriage. Yet, she had no choice. She was an orphan, and her voice had never been heard. On her wedding night, as she entered Yusuf's small wooden home, she was surprised by the way he welcomed her. His smile was shy, but his eyes were kind, not filled with cruelty like she had feared. The house was small, with only a bed, a table, and a few handmade chairs. There was no gold, no silk, no ornaments, nothing that made it look like a bride's new home. Yet, there was something in the air, something peaceful, almost sacred. Yusuf did not touch her forcefully, nor did he demand obedience like she had heard other men do. Instead, he said softly, "You must be tired. Rest. This house is yours now, and so is my life. I will take care of you as best as I can." At first, Amina struggled with the simplicity of her new life. She wore old clothes, cooked with very little food, and often felt the sting of neighbors' gossip. Women from the village would whisper, "Poor girl, married to a carpenter, she will know no happiness." Every time she went to the well, she heard mocking laughter, as if her marriage was a joke. Her heart ached, and sometimes she cried silently at night when Yusuf was asleep. Yet, slowly, she began to notice things that others ignored. Yusuf would always make sure she ate first, even if it meant he went hungry. He repaired neighbors' broken doors and chairs without asking for payment, simply saying, "God sees what we do." And when she was sick one day, he walked miles in the rain just to bring her medicine. Months passed, and Amina's cold heart began to soften. She realized she was not living in wealth, but she was living in dignity. Still, a part of her wondered why Yusuf never seemed desperate for money. Unlike other poor men, he never begged, never complained. He worked hard, but often disappeared for hours, returning with a calm face. She wanted to ask, but she was afraid it would seem ungrateful. One winter evening, as snow covered the village, Yusuf returned home later than usual. He carried a box she had never seen before. With quiet hands, he placed it in front of her and said, "Amina, I think it's time you know the truth." Her eyes widened as he opened the box. Inside were papers, old keys, and a leather pouch filled with coins more money than she had ever seen in her life. Stunned, she looked at him in silence, unable to understand. Yusuf explained that years ago, his father had been a wealthy landowner, but after his death, greedy relatives tried to seize everything. Rather than fight for riches that would cause hatred, Yusuf chose to live simply as a carpenter, hiding the wealth in secret. "Gold can feed the stomach," he told her, "but kindness feeds the soul. I wanted a woman who would see me for my heart, not for my fortune." Tears streamed down Amina's face as she realized the depth of his wisdom. She had judged him by the world's standards, but he had given her more than riches. He had given her honor, safety, and love. With time, Yusuf revealed more. He owned not just money, but lands far beyond the village, stretching into fertile fields and orchards. Amina could hardly believe it. Together, they decided to use the wealth not for pride, but for compassion. They built wells for the poor, gave children education, and helped widows who had no one to feed them. The same villagers who once mocked her now looked at her with respect. They whispered in awe, "The orphan bride who was pitied is now the queen of kindness." But the greatest change was within Amina herself. She no longer felt like a burden, no longer cursed her fate. She realized her suffering had led her to a man who taught her the true meaning of wealth. Riches were not in gold or land, but in love, humility, and service to others. And as she stood beside Yusuf, helping him change lives, she felt that her parents' prayers had been answered in the most unexpected way. In the end, her story was not one of punishment, but of divine destiny. She had been forced into a marriage she thought was her doom, but it became the greatest blessing of her life. Amina learned that sometimes life takes away everything so that it can give back something far greater.